Fear and Trembling by Soren Kierkegaard and Johannes de Silentio, John the Silent. Preface. Not merely in the realm of commerce, but in the world of ideas as well, our age is organizing a regular clearance sale. Everything is to be had at such a bargain that it is questionable whether in the end there's anybody who will want to bid. In our age, everything is unwilling to stop face, but goes further. It was different in those ancient days. Face was then a task for a whole lifetime. The faithful one's heart was still young enough to have forgotten the anxiety and trembling that disciplined youth, that the adult learned to control, but that no man outgrows, except to the extent that he succeeds in going further as early as possible. The present author is by no means a philosopher. He is in a poetic and refined way a supplementary clerk who neither writes the system nor gives promises of the system, who neither exhausts himself on the system nor binds himself to the system. He writes because to him is a luxury that is all the more pleasant and apparent the fewer there are who buy and read what he writes. Even if someone were able to transpose the whole content of faith into conceptual form, it does not follow that he has comprehended faith, comprehended how he entered into it, or how it entered into him. He dreads the even more terrible fate of being totally ignored. He has a terrible foreboding that the zealous critic will call him on the carpet many times. He dreads the even more terrible fate that some enterprising abstractor, gobbler of paragraphs, who, in order to save science, is always willing to do to the writings of others what Tromp magnanimously did with his The Destruction of the Human Race in order to save good taste, will cut him up into paragraphs and do so with the same inflexibility as the man who, in order to serve the science of punctuation, divided his discourse by counting out the words, 50 words to period and 35 to semicolon. I throw myself down in the deepest submission before every systematic ransacker. This is not the system. It has not the least thing to do with the system. I invoke everything good for the system and for the Danish shareholders in this omnibus, for it will hardly become a tower. I wish them all, each and every one, succeeds and good fortune. A panegyric upon Abraham. If a human being did not have an eternal consciousness, if underlying everything there were only wild, fermenting power, and that rising in dark passions produced everything, be it significant or insignificant, if a vast, never appeased emptiness is beneath everything, what would be life then but despair? If such were the situation, if there were no sacred bond that knit humankind together, if one generation emerged after another like a forest foliage, if one generation succeeded another like singing of the birds in the forest, if a generation passed through the world as a ship through the sea, as wind through the desert, an unthinking and unproductive performance, if an eternal oblivion, perpetually hungry, lurked for its prey, and there were no power strong enough to wrench that away from it, how empty and devoid of consolation life would be. The poet or orator can do nothing that the hero does. He can only admire, love, and delight in him. Yet he, too, is happy. No less than that one is, for the hero is, so to speak, his better nature, with which he is enamored, yet happy that the other is not himself, that his love can be admiration. He is recollection's genius. He can do nothing but bring to mind what has been done, can do nothing but admire what has been done. He takes nothing of his own, but is zealous for what has been entrusted. He follows his heart's desire, but when he has found the object of his search, he roams about to every man's door with his song and speech, so that all may admire the hero as he does, may be proud of the hero as he is. This is his occupation, his humble task. This is his faithful service in the house of the hero. No one who is great in the world will be forgotten, but everyone was great in his own way, and everyone in proportion to the greatness of that which he loved. He who loved himself became great by virtue of himself, and he who loved other men became great by his devotedness. But he who loved God became greatest of all. Everyone shall be remembered, but everyone became great in proportion to his expectancy. One became great by expecting the possible, another by expecting the eternal. But he who expected the impossible became greatest of all. Everyone shall be remembered, but everyone was great wholly in proportion to the magnitude of that with which he struggled. For he who struggled with the world became great by conquering the world, but he who struggled with himself became great by conquering himself. But he who struggled with God became greatest of all. By faith, Abraham received the promise that in his seed all the generations of the earth would be blessed. Time passed. The possibility was there. Abraham had faith. Time passed. It became unreasonable. Abraham had faith. There was one in the world who was given an expectancy. Time passed. Evening drew near. He was not contemptible as to forget his expectancy, and therefore he will not be forgotten either. If Abraham had doubted as he stood there on Mount Moriah, if irresolute he had looked around, if he had happened to spot the ram before drawing the knife, if God had allowed him to sacrifice it instead of Isaac, then he would have gone home. Everything would have been the same. He would have had Sarah. He would have kept Isaac. And yet, how changed! For his return would have been a flight, his deliverance an accident, his reward disgrace, his future perhaps perdition. Then he would have witnessed neither to his faith nor to God's grace, but would have witness to how appalling it is to go to Mount Moriah. Father Abraham, second father of the race, you who were the first to feel and to bear witness to that prodigious passion that disdains the terrifying battle with the raging elements and the forces of creation in order to contend with God. You who were the first to know that supreme passion, the holy, pure, and humble expression for the divine madness that was admired by the pagans. Forgive the one who aspired to speak you praise, if he has not done it properly. It is human to lament, human to weep with them that weep, but it is greater to believe, more blessed to contemplate the believer. Preamble from the heart. From the external and visible world comes the old adage, only one who works gets bread. Oddly enough, the adage does not fit the world in which it is most at home. For imperfection is the fundamental law of the external world, and here it happens and again that he who does not work gets bread, and he who sleeps gets more abundantly than he who works. In the external world, everything belongs to the possessor. It is different in the world of the spirit. Here, an external divine order prevails. Here, it does not rain on both the just and unjust. Here, the sun does not shine of both good and evil. Here, it holds true that only the one who works gets bread, that only the one who is in anxiety finds rest. The one who descends into the lower world rescues the beloved, that only the one who draws the knife gets Isaac. There is a knowledge that presumptuously wants to introduce into the world of the spirit the same law of indifference under which the external world sighs. It believes that it is enough to know what is great. No other work is needed. But for this reason, it does not get bread. It perishes of hunger while everything changes to gold. And what in fact does it know? What is omitted from Abraham's story is the anxiety, because to money I have no ethical obligation, but to the Son the Father has the highest and holiest. We forget it and yet want to talk about Abraham. So we, and in the process of talking, interchange the two terms, Isaac and the best, and everything goes fine. But just suppose that someone listening is a man who suffers from sleeplessness. Then, more terrifying, the most profound, tragic, and comic misunderstanding is very close at hand. He goes home. He wants to do as Abraham did, for the son, after all, is the best. If the preacher found out about, he perhaps would go to the man he would muster all his ecclesiastical dignity and shout, "You despicable man! You scum of society! What devil has so possessed you that you would murder your son?" And the pastor, who had not noticed any heat or perspiration when preaching about Abraham, would be surprised at himself, at the wrathful earnestness with which he thunders at the poor man. He would be pleased with himself, for he had never spoken with such emphasis and emotion. He would say to himself and his wife, "I am an orator." What was lacking was the occasion. When I spoke about Abraham on Sunday, I did not feel gripped at all. If the same speaker has a little superfluity of understanding to spare, I am sure he would have lost it if the sinner calmly and with dignity answered, "But after all, that was what you yourself preached about on Sunday." Passion is necessary. Every movement of infinity comes about by passion, and no reflection can bring a movement about. The ethical expression of what Abraham did is that he meant to murder Isaac. The religious expression is that he meant to sacrifice Isaac. But precisely in this contradiction is the anxiety that can make a person sleepless. And yet, without this anxiety, Abraham is not who he is. Most people live dejectedly in worldly sorrow and joy. They are the ones who sit along the wall and do not join in the dance. The knights of infinity are dancers and possess elevation. They make the movements upward and fall down again, and this too is no mean pastime, nor ungraceful to behold. But whenever they fall down, they are not able at once to assume the posture. They vacillate an instant, and this vacillation shows that after all they are strangers in the world. This is more or less strikingly evident in proportion to the art they possess. But even the most artistic knights cannot altogether conceal this vacillation. One need not look at them when they are up in the air, but only the instant they touch or have touched the ground. Then one recognizes them. But to be able to fall down in such a way that the same second it looks as if one were standing and walking, to transform the leap of life into a walk, absolutely to express this sublime in the pedestrian, that only the knight of faith can do. And this is the one and only prodigy. I think myself into the hero. I cannot think myself into Abraham. When I reach that eminence, I sink down, for what is offered to me is a paradox. I by no means conclude that faith is something inferior, but rather that it is the highest. Also that it is dishonest of philosophy to give something else in its place and to disparage faith. Philosophy cannot and must not give faith, but it must understand itself in no way it offers and take nothing away. Least of all trick men out of something by pretending that it is nothing. I believe, nevertheless, that I shall get her in virtue. That is of the absurd, in virtue of the fact that with God all things are possible.